think that they tend to stay together. It didn't seem common to me that staying with a mate for 1 year. Yeah.
Did you notice any difference between males and females, like whether they would switch partners more often, whether they were male?
That was another thing that's kind of hard to look at because we have to, these gulls, you can't tell them apart just by looking at them. So we have to breed them and then sex them molecularly, and that can be a really slow process. So a lot of the gulls we don't have that information on, or at least like the ones I filtered it down to. But from what I was seeing, the ones that I did know, I didn't see any difference. And
Do you think that once they get divorced, it's possible for them to get back together in the future?
I did not see that. I thought that I saw that at one point, and then I realized that it was someone had misread the band of the bird. So it was, the pair was, I think, 1M7 and 7PO. And I'm looking at 1M7's history, and there's this 1 year where he's with 1N7. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. He left 7PO and then came back to her. And then I was like, no, wait a minute. Someone misread 1M7's band. So he was just counted twice on the same nest. He actually had been with 7PO for like 7 years now. And I think they were actually one of the very first pairs on this island to breed this year, actually. But no, I did not see that. Right.
So on the one hand you have monogamy, on the other hand you have promiscuity, I guess.
Yeah, promiscuity.
So I'm curious if this is all just bet hedging by this population, that
It's fun.
bet hedging. So like there's benefits to both of those things, right?
Okay.
So there's benefits to monogamy,
Yep.
Reliable partner,
Yep.
you share chores or whatever, and it
Yeah.
all works out great. But then promiscuity has benefits too because you have multiple partners, there's more genetic diversity. So I'm curious if like this might just be the middle of the road for this population and this species, that like they're dabbling in both because there's this benefit to straddling and sort of doing both things. I'm curious if you have any thoughts. Like, and maybe it's just more random. Like maybe you just have individuals
Yeah.
that will divorce
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
I mean, the thing is, actual, like, 100% staying together for life monogamy is really rare in just all animals. So we see it in, I think, great blue herons, in albatross, and this little African mammal called a diptych. But, like, there are very few species that you actually see that with. That's why we refer to monogamy as being by the season. So yeah, I do look at these gulls and think about genetic diversity a lot because that's one of the drawbacks of having natal fidelity and monogamy as well. But I think that that's why we need to look at divorce really to understand what makes it an adaptive strategy because it is so prominent in the animal kingdom.
Yes.
I don't know if does that answer your
Yeah.
question? Okay. Did someone else have a hand? Yeah.
Do you think there's any difference between like divorce rates in herring gulls versus blackbacks?
I don't think so. Just by like being around them so much, like their mating strategies are pretty similar, even though a lot of their behaviors aren't, or that their behaviors might like be on different levels of the same spectrum. But yeah, their mating strategy seems similar. I would think that information found in one could be extrapolated to the other. I almost included the herrings in this, but it was just like I only had a few individuals to look at anyway, so I figured I'd just stick to blackbacks.
Wait.
Oh,
Sorry.
one more question.
Was there a difference, I don't know if you saw this, difference in success rate between ones that have been divorced and ones that stayed together?
So I didn't look at that myself, but a study from 2006 that I had read said that there was like, it wasn't a predictor, basically. Yeah, because that seems like the obvious one. It's not.
All right, let's thank Amisha one more time. Okay, so next we'll be having Colin Love from Michigan State University present. Colin is a parasite ecology intern mentored by Dr. April Blakeslee from East Carolina University, as well as Rebecca Barnard. Colin will be presenting on how parasitism alters predation rates.
Thank you, Brian. As Brian said, my name is Colin, and I've been on Appledore Island for the last 10 weeks studying parasites and how they alter the predation rates of their hosts. Okay. But to begin, I want to talk a little bit about food webs and bring everybody back to their third grade science class. So, as many of you may know, food webs represent the important linkages between species in a system, and they show the flow of energy in a system. And typically they're shown to have three primary focuses of connectivity between your primary producers, your herbivores, and your consumers. However, historically, there's been one critical component or group of individuals that have been overlooked in these structures, and myself, including many other scientists, believe that they deserve just as much recognition as those other three. Those components are parasites. So parasites historically have been typically left out of food web analyses, which is really interesting because parasites make up roughly 30% of the identified species on this planet. Furthermore, some food webs contain more parasite-host relationships than predator-prey relationships, and some parasites require multiple hosts. So not only are they interacting with one individual, but they're interacting with multiple individuals. And we do know that not all parasites kill their hosts, and that's a really common misconception when we think about parasites. We hear the word parasite, it's kind of a nasty word, you think of these little bugs, but we do know that they alter host behavior in such situations. So those that alter host behavior have been found to change foraging patterns and practices, as well as predator avoidance tactics, and some hosts experience increased lethargy. And these species that experience these behavioral modifications after being parasitized also often modify species interactions between hosts and predators or prey. And these behavioral changes typically benefit the parasite by increasing the transmission rate via predation. And so I just want to show you guys a quick video of this gastropod. It's a snail that has been infected by a parasitic flatworm, and it's experiencing both the physiological and behavioral change. This is going to be fun. There we go. So what you're seeing here is a physiological change. There's a parasite in the antenna of this snail, and what's happening is it's creating that pulsating motion, trying to send out a signal to its predator saying, "Come eat me." It's a really, really cool trait that we're seeing that's actually caused by this infection. And the reason why is it's because it's increasing the predation rates of this snail. Now, what you're also not seeing, though, is a behavioral change. So a study found that after these snails have been infected, they're not only exhibiting this physiological change, but they're climbing to higher areas in treetops and exposing themselves in more open areas so that avian predators, birds, will see them more easily and then increase the transmission rate of this parasite to its next host. Now, in order to see, oh, there it is again. In order to see if this parasite-host interaction exists amongst other systems, specifically right here in the Gulf of Maine, I decided to study a parasite called Microphyllus similis. It is a parasitic trematode that requires multiple hosts through its life cycle. The image that you're seeing below is just representing the different life cycle stages that it goes through. And the other individual that I looked at was the European green crab. I'm sure many of you have heard of this individual. It is an invasive species that got here roughly 200 years ago. And it is a host of numerous parasite species, including Microphyllus similis. So I'm going to, for the sake of the rest of the talk, refer to the green crab as Carcinus manus, because that scientific name is drilled into my head, and it's very hard to remember to say green crab. So, to give you guys a little bit of background on Microphyllus similis and its life cycle, they require 3 hosts. It first starts off with snails in the intertidal. After they graze over gull feces that contains a parasite, they then become infected. At that point, the parasitized snails will then shed what are called cercaria, which are individual Microphyllus similis parasites, into the water column. Those cercaria will then infect Carcinus manus, and then from that point, the parasite will develop what are called metasecarial cysts. Now, this is an important fact. These metasecarial cysts have been found to take roughly 3 to 4 weeks to develop distinct cyst walls. From that point then on, the gulls will then come in, or predatory birds. In this instance, we're going to be focusing on gulls. Will consume these parasitized crabs. The parasite will essentially reproduce within the gut of this gull, and then defecate out the parasite eggs, and the life cycle will start all over again. So what we know about this parasite-host interaction is that initially after being infected, Carcinus manus exhibits behavioral changes. This is a method that's decreased performance, And if you look at this graph here on the right, we have treatment on our x-axis. Blue is indicating the uninfected crabs, and green is indicating infected crabs. On our y-axis, we have our mean flip time, and to give you guys a little bit of background, mean flip time is the amount of time it takes for a crab after it's been placed on its back to flip over. What I found, which aligned with the previous study's findings, was that infected crabs exhibited longer flip time, so it took them longer to right themselves over, and this is a measure of increased lethargy. And we also know from previous studies that these behavioral changes are not long-lasting, and that microphthalocymos does not cause mortality. But we want to know a little bit more about how it alters species interactions, and we're not really sure about this. So in order to test that, I looked at how microphthalocymos alters the predation rates of green crabs. And so piecing together this information that we have, so it alters behavior, and we know that it could potentially interact with species, or contribute to species interactions. I predicted that after being infected, these individuals who are exhibiting this lethargic behavior will be less likely to get away from predators, being more susceptible to predation, and being consumed at higher rates than uninfected individuals down here on the right. So in order to test this, I would begin by collecting parasitized snails. I did so by sampling 5 different sites, 4 right here on Appledore Island and 1 off island at Dork Beach, Maine, with the help of my mentor. And what we did was we were collecting 200 snails to get an idea of, okay, what are the parasite infection rates? After dissecting these 200 snails from each site, I found that one on-island site at high tide dock, circled in red there, had a 4.5% infection rate, and then my off-island site, North Beach, Maine, had a 6% infection rate. So I used these 2 sites then to collect my parasitized snails to then infect my crabs with. And if you look here on the left, I've got a shot. What's difficult to see is a bunch of parasites within a dissected snail that I had been looking at underneath the microscope. So these structures that are circled with the black circles, those are sporocysts. The best way to describe them is just basically these parasite sacs that carry lots of these individual cercaria that I was mentioning earlier. The little dots you can barely see surrounding these parasite sacs are cercaria, those individual parasites. And some snails, depending on the infection intensity, can have hundreds to thousands of these individuals within time. So, my next step was then to infect my crabs. Well, in order to infect my crabs, I had to collect crabs. And with the help of my mentor, Dr. April Blakesley, some previous work found that there was a low prevalence parasite site off island at Adams Point. So we wanted to collect crabs from this location because for the purpose of this study, we didn't want to be exposing crabs that could already be infected. And so we collected some crabs from this low parasite infection site, and we set up 2 tanks here right on island, an exposed tank and a control tank. Within our exposed tank, we had parasitized snails that were infecting the crabs on a regular basis, and then in our control tank, we had no parasitized snails. And these 2 treatments were then used to measure predation. Then we also had an additional group of crabs in our exposed tank that would be used for dissections. But the reason why I was exposing this additional group of crabs was because, unfortunately for Persinitis matus, they don't exhibit any external cues of infection. And so, unfortunately for them, I had to dissect those individuals and extract that one tissue you see here on the right. That's a hepatopancreas, the digestive tissue. And look underneath the compound microscope at what you see on the left in the red circle are those little hot dog-like structures folded in half. Those are those metasecurial cysts I was talking about in the early developmental stages. And so this was an indicator that, yes, I was successful at exposing my crabs. Next, I had to measure predation, and I did so by performing tethering experiments. For those of you who are unaware what tethering experiments are, it's basically putting an organism on a line and anchoring them out in your study site. For this case, I was anchoring these infected and uninfected crabs in the mid to lower intertidal for 48 hours to measure predation at 24 and 48 hours. If you look at the image on the right, I've just got a shot of a quadrat that I was using to standardize these sites. So you can see here that I've got algal refuge that made up roughly 10% of the site, and then 2 rock structures to provide areas for them to manipulate and hide that had a similar circumference around 50 to 65 centimeters. And this just made sure that there was consistency amongst all individuals that were being tethered. So, for my prediction, and heading back to what I had hypothesized before, given this lethargic behavior that they exhibit, I thought that my infected crabs would be predated upon at greater rates than my uninfected crabs, as depicted here. So we've got treatment on the x-axis and count on the y-axis. Red indicates the individuals that were alive, black indicates the individuals that had died due to predation. What I originally predicted was that, yes, more exposed to be consumed. However, in reality, I saw quite the opposite. So I saw that more control crabs were actually eaten, which was really, really cool and really, really interesting. But what was even more interesting was that those predation rates leveled out after 48 hours. And so this got me thinking, could there be a connection with previous studies that found that these behavioral changes are not long-lasting? So, in order to determine why these equalization of predation rates are occurring, I went back to my flip trials. So to remind everybody, flip trials are a measure of how long it takes for a crab after being placed on its back to right itself. And right here on the x-axis, we have a period showing the initial flip trial after infection, then 48 hours later for the same group of individuals. For the sake of this analysis, I used 5 crabs. And what I found was lethargic behavior seemed to diminish over time. So the crabs that after initially infected had longer flip times than 48 hours later. And so I thought maybe this is a measurement of increased performance, and maybe this is a rationale as to why we're seeing an equalization of predation after 48 hours. So, to summarize all this sciencey stuff, I found the opposite of what I had predicted. Once again, microphyllus similis reduced the predation rates of Carcinus magnus. And lethargic behavior could be responsible, for reducing exposure to predators. Previous studies have found that prey movement is often how predators detect their prey. And given that gulls, or shorebirds, are very visual predators, it makes sense. If these individuals are lethargic and hiding for most of the day, they're not going to be exposed like the other crabs that are running around doing the normal crab things when they do on leashes. I don't know. But, so then also, similar trends have been observed in other studies. So there was a study conducted actually that just wrapped up this past year that found that parasitized mosquito larvae exhibited reduced thrashing, and this reduced thrashing diminished their exposure to predators, therefore decreasing their predation rates. And with that last analysis that I was showing you guys, these behavioral changes that are impacting predation could be not long-lasting. However, I did have a smaller sample size of 5, and so I don't know if I forgot to mention the standard error bars overlapped quite a bit on that graph. So moving forward, larger sample sizes with more replicants can provide stronger evidence to create stronger conclusions as to if we are seeing an actual diminishing behavior over time. And kind of wrap things up with that, this could make sense for microphylus similis, because as I mentioned before, those metacenteria cysts that develop after being the crab's infected take roughly 3 to 4 weeks to develop a distinct cell wall. And we're speculating that within those first 3 to 4 weeks, if a crab were to be consumed, microphylus similis parasite cysts within the crab are not fully developed and therefore makes them vulnerable to mortality because of how much mechanical and chemical digestion they go through. And so if you have crabs being predated upon prematurely, that these parasites are not going to be able to sexually reproduce in the goal of the gut and therefore contribute to population. So it makes sense that we're seeing possibly a decrease or like incubation time for these parasites when the crabs are hiding. And to wrap that up, why should we care? Because we should so care about parasites. I want to bring back that main point that I talked about before, how food webs sometimes contain more parasite-host relationships than predator-prey. And so there's a high abundance. Furthermore, there's little evidence supporting how parasite manipulations of their hosts contribute to food webs. And given that right here we're finding that altered behavior can potentially impact species interactions, there's reason to believe that this could potentially alter food web fluctuations long term. Furthermore, most studies that have studied altered behavior of hosts by parasites have found that this altered behavior increases predation. But this study itself found the opposite, decreased predation. And so it just goes to show that there's a lot of diversity that exists in nature, and this is just one component to providing evidence for that diversity, and the many more other host manipulation trends that could exist. To wrap it up, I would just like to give a huge thanks to my mentor, Dr. April Blakesley, for giving me this incredible opportunity to come out here and study these parasites and just being a great support system along the way. Dealing with my 5-paragraph long text messages and all the questions I've had. And also, of course, Rebecca Barner, a graduate student who has been not only an amazing mentor, but a really, really good friend. So, and Schultz Marine Lab for obviously providing such a great community, so welcoming, especially for somebody that's not from the East Coast. You guys are pretty cool. So, is there any questions?
Okay, so you did this flipping exercise to test behavior,
Yep.
But you said that the incubation can be up to 3 weeks, right?
3 to 4 weeks, yep.
Do you have any thoughts about why that's not longer, or maybe any ideas if there's other behaviors that are impacted that you didn't study yet?
So why the behavior is not long lasting, or?
Yeah, I mean, if it's interesting that they're not in sync, like if the
Right.
incubation.
You would think it'd be a little bit longer to see those diminish in pretty
Right.
big. So there's two things. One, maybe a larger sample size could show that there's like a gradual decline rather than just like